In 1991, a German historian named Professor Heribert Illig put forward a controversial hypothesis that shook the academic world through his hypothesis, called phantom time hypothesis.
Wir graben Troja aus. Der Befund zeigt, die Stadt ist einmal.
In his hypothesis, Illig claims that the nearly 300 years of history that we know as the Middle Ages actually never happened. According to Illig, the period between 614 and 911 AD was the result of engineering a fictional historical construction that was deliberately created by world leaders at that time. He argued that there was no authentic evidence in the form of events or artifacts that could support the existence of that period. Illig even stated that some famous historical figures, such as the great emperors, were just fictions created to give legitimacy to historical periods that never actually existed. Based on this hypothesis, we should be in the 1700s, not the 2000s, so this year should be 1727. Instead, the year 2024, according to Illig. Most historical events and changes are the result of engineering carried out by the ruling authorities to manipulate the calendar and change the world view. Illig claimed that there had been a major conspiracy involving the addition of fake years to the time period between 614 and 911 AD. He alleged that Holy Roman Emperor Otto III, Pope Sylvester II, and Emperor Constantine VII collaborated in creating this fictional historical period. They allegedly manipulated the calendar so that their reign appeared to coincide with the year 1000 AD, exactly 1 millennium after the birth of Jesus Christ. Considering that the year multiplied hundreds of times in Anno Domini, or the Year of God, which was believed to bring good luck to their rule. Then there is a little additional information, according to Herbert Illig, who explains the context of the Holy Roman Empire, which at that time was the first largest empire in Germany, which once controlled most of Western Europe in the 10th to early 19th centuries, the Great Holy Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is also referred to as the First Rich, and the connection is when Hitler came to power with his Nazis, who intended to revive this empire by creating the Third Rich during the World War, namely the Catholic religion led by the Pope, which was centered in the Western Roman Empire in Rome. Italy and others were Orthodox Christian religions centered in Byzantium, or the Eastern Roman Empire, which is now Turkish territory with its capital in Constantinople, which we now know as Istanbul to hide their fabrications from future generations. Otto III and Sylvester II allegedly employed scribes to alter medieval manuscripts, where old manuscripts were destroyed, while new texts containing false history were distributed to monasteries and libraries throughout Europe, creating the illusion that the history we know today was accurate. In addition, Illig also doubts the scarcity of archaeological evidence and historical documentation from the early medieval period. He questions the existence of artifacts and documents dating from that era, and argues that many famous historical figures of that era are just legends similar to the stories of King Arthur. And Illig also notes that the years before 614 and after 911 were filled with important events, while the period 614 to 911 appears to be devoid of historical events. Heribert Illig also showed that the shift from the Julian to the Gregorian calendar occurred in the 16th century in Europe. At that time, the Julian calendar, introduced by the Emperor Julius Caesar since ancient Roman times, had an error in that the calendar system assumed that 1 year consisted of 365 days. Correct. Even though in fact one revolution of the Earth about the Sun is actually around 365.25 days. In other words, there is a difference of around 1/4 day in a year. After several centuries, the difference, which looks small, then accumulates to several days. To correct it, a new calendar system called the Gregorian calendar. According to the name of its originator, Pope Gregorian was introduced in 1582. This calendar adapted by adding 11 days to pay off the difference between these days. In other words, when it was set on October 4th, 1582, the next day was not October 5th, but instead October 15th, 1582. According to Heribert Illig, if just 11 days were added to history so easily by the rulers, then it is not impossible that the year could be manipulated even further. The phantom time hypothesis has drawn controversy and strong criticism from historians and history experts. Many argue that it was impossible for the government at that time to erase an entire historical period and falsify all existing artifact. Historians also point out that archaeological evidence and historical manuscripts cannot be changed as a whole, and that the numerical method used by Illig was considered inaccurate and too complicated. Even though this hypothesis seems implausible, Illig still received support from several parties, including Hans Ulrich Niemitz, a revisionist historian. In 1995, Niemitz published a paper supporting Illig's idea by stating that the approximately 300 years of history between antiquity and the Renaissance were actually not ever existed. However, Niemitz also admitted that his argument could be refuted by historical facts, such as the battles recorded during that period. This historical conspiracy hypothesis also has similarities with other ideas put forward by historians such as Anatoly Fomenko, who argues that great civilizations such as classical Greece and the Roman Empire never actually existed during the Middle Ages. According to Fomenko, civilization did not begin until 800 AD. This kind of view emerged in part as a response to views about the Dark Ages, which are often described as a period of technological and cultural decline following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. A number of historians and researchers, such as Leland Grigory, argue that hypotheses such as the phantom time hypothesis are often driven by Eurocentrism and racial bias that downplays or questions the existence of historical periods that do not fit their views of European cultural progress. Although there is a lot of evidence showing that the period 614 to 911 actually existed, such as astronomical and dendrochronological records, as well as historical records from China and the Middle East, conspiracy theories remain difficult to eradicate because they are often based on distrust of official authority and history. The fact that these hypotheses continues to be debated shows how complex and dynamic the way we understand and interpret history is.